All right, joining me now is Chris Harmer, Senior Naval Analyst at the Institute for the Study of War. He also served in the U.S. Navy as Deputy Director of Future Operations for the Fifth Fleet. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. This is a vessel with just a ton of history. It was first used in 1962 in the Cuban Missile Crisis blockade in Cuba. And since then, it has traveled to conflict regions around the world. It's become a movie star in its own right. How special is this aircraft carrier?
Melissa, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. The Enterprise is the oldest aircraft carrier in the Navy, and it's the oldest combat vessel of any Navy in the world today. So it is a special ship. A lot of us are sad to see the Enterprise go, but she served the nation well. As an economist, I think you'll appreciate the fact that we've gotten 50 years of use out of this ship. So whatever the taxpayers paid for it in 1961, it was commissioned in 1962, and it served faithfully for 50 years. So I think it's a great ship, and I'm glad that you had the opportunity to go aboard for a night.
No, I mean, it was really amazing. It of course, cost billions, and I think at the time there were plans for many, many more, but the overruns on this one was so high that they didn't end up doing a lot more exactly like this. Isn't that true? And it's run by nuclear power. I think it has 8 reactors on board. It is sort of one of a kind.
Yes, Melissa, it is one of a kind, and that is why that ship cost so much back then. It was the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the world, and it was built with 8 nuclear reactors. And because the technology was so new, because the shipyard workers weren't exactly sure how to build it, it was kind of a one-of-a-kind ship. After the Enterprise was built, the Navy went back to building steam-powered ships, oil-fired ships, and so the next 3 or 4 aircraft carriers were conventionally powered. It took the Navy about 10 years to figure out exactly how to do nuclear power for aircraft carriers, and since that time, all aircraft carriers have been built with nuclear power plants. All of the aircraft carriers we have today are nuclear powered, and we will probably never see a conventionally powered ship again of that size.
No, and it's a historic vessel. It's a lot of fun. We were joking before we left that this was Top Gun, and we didn't even realize that it really was Top Gun. We went to the place where they threw Tom Cruise threw the dog tags overboard, and we saw where they buzzed the tower. It was in the hunt for Red October. It's historic, but it's now out of date. I mean, what is different about the newer aircraft carriers?
Well, the newer aircraft carriers save a lot of money by using streamlined power production. You've got a much longer lifespan out of the new nuclear carriers in terms of their nuclear core. And the greatest expense that the Navy incurs in any ship is the manpower costs. As an economist, I'm sure you see plenty of industries that have gotten more efficient, more productive, and the Navy's trying to follow that. The newest aircraft carriers will have about 15 to 20% fewer sailors on board than the older aircraft carriers do. So the increase in automated technology makes the new ships more efficient and requires less manpower, which saves the taxpayer money over the life of the ship.
But how much could it possibly save? I mean, we were trying to put together the numbers on what exactly this costs, and it was hard to sort of get them. We had our brain room working on it. The best we could come up with was that in 2004, the cost of maintaining a carrier strike group, the whole group, was $2.2 billion. Does that sound right to you? And of course, that was in 2004. What does it cost to keep something like this going?
You know, Melissa, it's almost impossible to get a very specific number because you're amortizing that cost over 50 years. For example, Enterprise was very expensive when it was built.
Well, this was the cost of maintaining it, though, is $2.2 billion. I mean, I know that the fixed cost of what you put in to build it is one thing, but I'm talking about keeping the group going. And you're talking about, there's 15% fewer people on board. That's some kind of a savings, but it's really not that much of a savings. What does this cost us, say, annually, do you think?
I think $2.2 billion per carrier strike group is probably a reasonable figure for what each of the 11 carrier strike groups that the Navy has cost the taxpayer.
And do you think it's worth it when you look at everything that they're doing? I mean, it's hard to put a price tag on freedom. You have to say that up front. At the same time, we have limited military resources. It's not endless. You have to decide where it's going to go. This particular group was, number one, keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. They're keeping the Iranians in check, whether they want to say it that way or not. They're also, while I was there, going out and flying missions over Afghanistan. They would take off every hour and a half in these groups, fly over Afghanistan and support our troops on the ground, whether that was verbally from the air or whether they were firing to the ground or whether, they were setting off bombs. They were supporting people on the ground in Afghanistan and then coming back to this aircraft carrier How essential is this, and is it worth the money?
Well, Melissa, you touched on a couple of great points there, and I'd like to give you an historic reference, which was Henry Kissinger used to say that the first question in a crisis is, where are the aircraft carriers? And the reason that question is asked is aircraft carriers are sovereign American territory. We have forces stationed throughout the Middle East in many of the countries there, but we always have to coordinate with those governments what military actions we take. The real advantage of an aircraft carrier is it's able to move wherever it wants, and it's able to do whatever it wants without permission from a third country. So the President and the National Command Authority love having aircraft carriers because they are flexible and they can respond to emergent crises without coordination with countries that may not support our foreign policy and security goals.
You know, that's a great point. And even while we were out there, they replenished this ship by bringing another ship next door to it and bringing over food and supplies and jet fuel and everything else, just for that very point that you made, so that they don't have to go into port to some country that may or may not want them. They can stay on the seas. Thank you so much for your perspective tonight. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Melissa. It was a pleasure to be with you.
So the job market hole is just getting deeper, but the White House says we're moving in the right direction. Maybe it's time to put down the shovel.